I still remember the way the air felt that night. Not cold, not warm, just thick. Like the room itself was holding its breath right along with me. It was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your thoughts louder. You know the one? Where even the sound of the clock ticking feels like it's pulsing right behind your ears. Like it's counting down to something. Something you asked for. Something you thought you wanted. But now you're not so sure. I was standing in the middle of my living room, bare feet on the wooden floor, glass of wine in hand, trying to act calm. Trying not to stare at the door. Trying not to look at my phone again. Trying not to think about the message I'd gotten an hour ago. He's on his way. And then it buzzed again. Just 2 words. 2 tiny words that somehow made my whole body go still. He's here. I didn't move. Not at first. I just stared at the screen like it might disappear if I blinked hard enough. Because here's the thing, this wasn't some wild affair I stumbled into by accident. This was something I said yes to, and God, that yes came so slowly. It started months ago, late night talks with my partner. Half-drunk confessions. Little truths we'd been too afraid to speak out loud. Like how I missed being touched. Not just physically but seen. Desired. Missed the feeling of someone's eyes tracing my skin like they were memorizing every inch of it. Don't get me wrong, my partner is a good man. He's loyal, steady, kind. But you can have all that and still feel like something's slipping through your fingers. Like you're becoming a ghost in your own house. A stranger in your own bed. Like you're wanted but not craved. Loved but not lit up from the inside out. You ever felt that? That ache you don't even realize you're carrying until someone new walks into the room and your body remembers what it's like to want again? That was me. Standing there. A woman with a full life, a solid relationship. And still aching in places I hadn't dared to touch in years. I walked to the door slowly, every step louder than it should have been. My heartbeat was so fast I could feel it in my wrists. I could have turned around. I could have poured out the wine, turned off the lights, and crawled into bed next to the man who trusts me, who loves me, who gave me this night. But I didn't. I opened the door. And when I saw him just standing there, no words, no expectations, something inside me shifted. Not in a reckless way. Not in a desperate way. But in a way that felt real. Like maybe, just maybe, I was about to find the part of myself I'd been missing. He didn't say a word when I opened the door. He just stood there. Calm. Certain. Like he knew exactly what this was. Exactly who I was. And maybe even what I needed. His eyes didn't drop to my body. Not right away. They stayed on my face, steady, unreadable, but not cold. There was heat there, but not the kind that burns you up too fast. The kind that simmers. The kind that waits. And for a second, I forgot to breathe. I stepped back without speaking, heart pounding so hard I could feel it behind my ribs. I didn't gesture. Didn't invite him in. I just stepped aside. And he walked in. Every movement was deliberate. Not rushed. Not unsure. Like his body knew the rhythm this moment required. He smelled like something I couldn't quite place, clean, but earthy. Like wind through pine trees. Like warmth caught in cotton. And it hit me harder than I expected. That scent, it didn't belong in my home, but somehow it fit. And that was the first time I felt guilty. He didn't look around. Didn't ask questions. He just turned slowly to face me as I closed the door behind him. There was a second, just one, where our eyes met and neither of us looked away. That silence wasn't awkward. It was thick with something I didn't have a name for yet. He still didn't touch me. Not then. He just stood there, close enough that I could feel the air between us shift. Close enough that I could sense his breath when I leaned in to walk past him. I brushed against him, accidentally but maybe not. And in that tiny moment, his hand slid lightly across the small of my back. Just a whisper of skin against skin. But it lingered. Not possessive. Not obvious. Just present. And it lit something in me. Something I'd buried so deep under routines and to-do lists and late-night silence with a man I promised my life to. I walked to the kitchen without turning around. but I could feel him behind me. His energy followed like a current. Not loud, not demanding, but pulling me all the same. I picked up my wine glass, hands slightly trembling, and took a sip. My lips left a mark on the rim. He hadn't spoken yet. Not a single word. And somehow that said everything. I turned around slowly, and there he was, leaning against the archway, arms crossed. Watching, not like a man waiting to make a move, like a man studying the moment, tasting it, breathing it in. His gaze traveled over me not like a man admiring curves or skin, but like he was memorizing me, reading me like a book he'd waited years to hold in his hands. And for the first time in so long, I felt seen. Not as someone's partner. Not as the girl who plays it safe, who does what's right. But as a woman. A breathing, aching, wanting woman. He stepped forward once. Twice. Slow. Silent. We stood just inches apart. And I swear to you, I felt the heat of his body before he even touched me. Like standing near a fire you didn't start, but suddenly realize you need to warm your hands over. Still, he didn't rush. His hand moved barely, just enough to lift a strand of hair from my shoulder. He brushed it back so gently it made me shiver. And then his fingers grazed the side of my neck. One soft line, like he was sketching me in his mind. I closed my eyes for a second. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I wanted to feel all of it. Every inch. Every second. Every space between us. When I opened them again, he was still looking at me. And then, finally, he spoke. Just 3 words. Are you sure? His voice was low. Steady. Not coaxing. Not trying to convince me. Just offering me the chance to leave. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't a man who came to take anything from me. He came to give something back. Something I hadn't known I'd lost. I didn't answer right away. I just stepped closer. And this time, I reached for him. Not a kiss. Not a grab. Just the softest touch, my fingertips against his chest. Feeling the slow rise and fall of his breath beneath my hand. And in that space between restraint and surrender, everything started to change. We didn't touch again for a while. Instead, I walked to the couch quiet, a little shaky, and sat down like the cushions might swallow me if I wasn't careful. He followed, but gave space. Not too far, just enough. He sat on the opposite end, his body angled toward mine. Hands on his knees. Relaxed. Patient. Like he was waiting for me to invite the next moment. Like none of this would happen without my permission. The silence settled around us again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It felt like a pause between heartbeats. Then his voice cut through, low and steady. You're quiet. I swallowed hard, not because I didn't know what to say, but because the words I did have felt like they mattered. There is something, I said softly. My fingers twisted in my lap. I don't know if I'm more afraid of what will happen tonight or what won't. He didn't flinch. Didn't smirk. He just nodded slowly, with that same quiet understanding that made him feel safe to sit this close to. I get that, he said. This isn't about taking something, you know. I'm not here for me. I looked at him then. Really looked. His eyes weren't hungry. They weren't cold. They were offering. That's the only way I can describe it. He leaned forward just slightly, elbows resting on his knees. I was asked to be here, he continued. Because someone out there, someone who knows you, believes you deserve to feel again. Not just be touched, but seen, wanted, chosen, without having to ask. The words hit something deep in me, because no one had ever said it like that. Not even the man I share my life with. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I don't even know what's real anymore, I admitted. I'm not unhappy. Not really. But sometimes I feel like I'm fading. Like the best parts of me are still in there somewhere, just waiting for someone to notice. He nodded again, softer this time. Maybe that's all this is, he said. Not cheating. Not betrayal. Just a remembering. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was more like the sound of someone finally cracking open. I miss being looked at, I whispered. I missed the way desire used to wrap around me without needing to explain why, or for how long, or if it was okay. He was still so still, but the way he listened it felt like being held without arms. I miss feeling like someone wants me. Not out of obligation. Not because the laundry's done or the house is clean. But because I'm me. Because I'm skin and warmth and fire, and I still have that inside me somewhere. He tilted his head, just slightly. You do, he said. His voice wasn't dramatic. It wasn't meant to charm. It was said like a truth. Like he saw something in me I'd forgotten how to see myself. I looked away. Sometimes I wonder if I'm selfish. If this whole thing this night makes me someone I never thought I'd be. There was a pause before he responded, and when he did, his voice was even lower. You're not selfish. You're honest. You're reaching for something you need. That's brave. And I believed him. Because in that moment, everything felt stripped bare. There was no pretending. No performance. Just two people sitting in the half-light, saying things out loud that had lived too long in silence. And it struck me how rare that is. We weren't even touching. But somehow I felt more naked than I ever had before. Every word was a risk. Every confession felt like walking out into the light. But it didn't feel shameful. It felt necessary. I turned toward him on the couch. Slowly, let my leg brush his. Just that. No grab. No rush. And he didn't flinch. He just stayed with me, right there in that charged, suspended space between everything we hadn't done and everything we both knew was still to come. The warmth of his leg against mine lingered. Not urgent. Just real. I turned slightly, enough to look at him fully. The dim lighting in the room threw soft shadows across his face, like the truth was still hiding somewhere, just beneath his skin. And then the words slipped out before I even realized I was saying them. My partner sent you. It wasn't a question. Not really. It was more like something my body knew before my mind could fully accept it. He met my gaze steady, open, quiet. Yes, he said. But I wouldn't have come if you hadn't said yes too. A silence fell between us. But this time, it wasn't awkward. It was heavy with understanding. With the weight of something too big to name all at once. I sat back slightly, heart drumming in my chest. My partner, the one I'd been quietly resenting for his distance, his silence. The way he'd become a roommate more than a lover, he was the one who sent this man to me. The thought tangled in my chest, sharp and soft at the same time. You're telling me, I said slowly, that the man I've been waiting to want me again was the one who gave me this? He nodded once. Not just gave. Offered. With love. With intention. Not because he doesn't want you, but because he does. Because he sees what's been missing. And he wanted you to have it, even if it couldn't come from him. I couldn't breathe for a moment. It was too much. Too generous. Too unbelievable. But at the same time it was exactly the kind of thing he would do. Quietly. Privately. Like setting the table but disappearing from dinner. Always behind the curtain. Never asking for recognition. There'd been a night just a few weeks ago where we lay in bed, backs turned but eyes wide open. And I had whispered something almost a joke, almost not. I just missed the feeling of being undeniable to someone. He hadn't responded. But maybe he had heard me after all. I don't know how to feel, I murmured. I want to be angry. But I'm not. I want to run. But I'm still here. He reached up then, slowly, brushing a loose strand of hair from my cheek. The touch was feather-light. But it grounded me in the moment. It's okay not to know, he said. What you're feeling, conflicted, turned on, unsure, it's all part of it. And God, he was right. Because I was stunned. But also something in me was simmering. Not just aroused. Awake. The idea that my partner wanted me to have this, it twisted something inside me. Something that felt a lot like permission, but also like freedom. Like being handed the key to a part of myself I'd locked away for years. And what made it even more confusing was that it didn't feel like betrayal. It felt offered. I looked at the man sitting beside me again, this stranger who somehow felt closer than anyone had in months. So I asked, voice barely above a whisper. What does he want out of this? His eyes didn't move from mine. To see you light up again. To see the woman he loves fully seen, fully wanted, without you having to carry the weight of asking for it. He wanted to be the reason you felt unleashed. My breath hitched. That word. Unleashed. Because that's what this was starting to feel like. Like being unshackled from the rules of my own life. From the version of myself I'd edited for the sake of being a good partner. And somewhere in all of this was a truth I hadn't expected. He wasn't giving me away. He was bringing me back to myself. Through someone else's eyes. Through someone else's hands. Not to replace him, but to remind me of what he still saw even if he couldn't always show it. I blinked slowly, heart thudding. Everything was different now. The night was no longer just about curiosity, or loneliness, or aching skin. It was about being chosen not just by the man beside me, but by the man I'd thought was drifting away. And that was the most intimate thing I'd felt in years. I sat there not moving. His eyes were still on me, steady, patient, like he knew better than to rush anything now. But inside me, everything was chaos. No one would have seen it from the outside. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. But my heart, God, it was trying to tear itself in two. I wanted this. That was the terrifying part. Not just in theory. Not just in some midnight fantasy I'd never admit out loud. I wanted him. Here. Now. But then the questions started, and they didn't come quietly. They came screaming. Is this cheating? The word felt heavy in my mouth, even unspoken. Was it betrayal if the person I was betraying was the very one who orchestrated this? Was it wrong if the rules had changed but only behind closed doors? Was it a test? What if this was all some elaborate trap? Some twisted way to catch me in a moment of weakness, just to prove a point? And worse, what if it wasn't a test at all? What if it was real? Because if it was real, then I had to own it. Own this desire. Own the part of me that didn't want to pull away. Own the part of me that hadn't felt seen, touched, wanted in so long. My throat felt tight. I looked away from him for the first time in minutes, staring at nothing, just trying to breathe through the noise in my head. I thought about my partner. About how, in the beginning, we couldn't keep our hands off each other. We'd laugh in grocery stores, text each other things we couldn't say out loud, touch each other in places we shouldn't just because we could. And then life happened. Routine. Work. Bills. Time. We didn't fall out of love. But we faded. Or maybe I did. Maybe I stopped trying. Stopped asking for more because I didn't want to sound needy. Stopped initiating because I was tired of being the only one who did. I didn't stop wanting. I just stopped expecting. And that wanting? It never left. It just got quieter. Smaller. Until it settled into the shape of a dull ache I lived with like background noise. But it was never gone. And now here it was surging back to life in the presence of a man whose name I barely even knew, but whose intention I felt more clearly than I'd felt in years. I ran a hand through my hair, shaking out the tension, like that would make it easier to think. What if I liked it too much? That question, it hit different. Because deep down, I already knew I would. Not just the physical part though, God, even the anticipation of that had me trembling. But the emotional part, the being chosen, the being seen, the being wanted with nothing else attached. And then there was the darker question. What if it made him see me differently? Would my partner still look at me the same way, knowing someone else had touched me? Would he resent me after the fact, even if he'd encouraged it? Would this shift something that couldn't be undone? I pressed my palms against my thighs, grounding myself in the pressure. There was no easy answer. And then just beneath all of that was something even more unsettling. What if it made me see myself differently? What if this didn't just open a door but broke a wall? What if I couldn't go back to who I was before? Because the woman I'd been for years, the one who played it safe, who waited to be chosen, who quieted her hunger so it wouldn't scare anyone off. She was slipping away. And in her place something new was stirring. Something dangerous. Something powerful. And I didn't know yet if that scared me or thrilled me. I felt my body leaning forward, just slightly. Drawn to him. Drawn to the possibility. But my heart? It hesitated. Not because it didn't want this, but because it knew what came next would change everything. And once you open a door like this, you don't get to close it the same way. I swallowed hard, and in that long, aching silence, I realized something important. I wasn't afraid of doing this. I was afraid of feeling too much because of it, because this wasn't about lust. This wasn't reckless. This wasn't careless. This was intimate, intentional, offered, and that made it so much more dangerous. Because when you feel something this deeply, you can't pretend it didn't happen. I stood up, slowly. The moment my body left the couch, I felt the shift, the weight of the choice, the breath of it. He looked up at me, but he didn't follow, didn't ask what I was doing. He just watched. And I said, "Wait here. If I come back, it's because I want this." No one had ever asked me to say it out loud before. To make the desire mine. To own it. But now that it was in the air, it felt like something I couldn't take back. And honestly, I didn't want to. I walked down the hall with my heart in my throat. Each step felt like peeling back a layer I hadn't touched in years. Not since before routine became comfort. And comfort turned into silence. Inside the bedroom, the air was still. The same sheets, the same soft lamp in the corner. But I was different. Everything felt louder in that moment, my heartbeat, my breath, the rush of blood behind my ears. I stood in front of the mirror. Not to pose. Not to seduce. Just to see myself. Really see myself. I reached for the silk robe that hung on the back of the door. It was deep plum, almost black in the soft light. It used to be my favorite, years ago. Back when I wore it for someone else. Tonight, I wore it for me. I let my hair down. Ran my fingers through it. No makeup. No perfume. No tricks. This wasn't a performance. This wasn't about being sexy. This was about arriving. As me. As a woman who was no longer afraid to be seen. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself. This wasn't just his fantasy anymore. Now it's mine too. And then I opened the door. I didn't walk out quickly. There was no drama in it. Just quiet certainty. He was still sitting there. Exactly where I'd left him. But when he looked up and saw me, really saw me, something passed between us. Something wordless. But electric. I stepped toward him. Bare feet on the cool floor. The silk brushing against my thighs like a secret. He didn't reach for me. Didn't move. It had to be me. And I wanted it to be. So I crossed the space between us. And this time I touched him first. Just my fingers. Brushing lightly against the side of his face. Testing the edge of the moment. And when he leaned ever so slightly into that touch, I felt something crack open in me. Not a shatter. Not a break. A release. A soft, silent yes. Rising from somewhere deep. I traced his jawline with my thumb, slow and deliberate. Then I slid my hand down to rest on his chest right over his heart. It was beating fast. Just like mine. So no, this wasn't just my moment. It was ours. Two people in a room. Unraveling the old rules. And writing new ones in the spaces between touch, breath, and choice. I looked into his eyes. And I didn't ask for permission. I didn't wait for another sign. Because I'd already given myself the answer. And sometimes, the most powerful thing a woman can do is not to be chosen, but to choose. Don't say anything, I whispered. Just follow. My voice came out lower than I expected, hoarse almost, like it had traveled up from somewhere buried inside me. And when I said those words, I didn't even recognize myself. But I meant them. I turned without waiting, my bare feet silent against the floor. He followed, just like I knew he would. The hallway stretched in front of us, lit only by the flicker of candles I'd lit earlier without thinking. Amber glows danced across the walls. Everything looked softer, warmer, not real. Like stepping into a dream you're afraid to wake up from. My robe slid slightly as I walked, and I didn't fix it. I didn't rush. I didn't explain. Every step was deliberate, measured, because this wasn't just walking, it was a slow surrender. A ritual. Behind one of the closed doors, my partner waited. That fact throbbed beneath my skin like a second heartbeat. Heavy, present. He wasn't gone. He wasn't absent. He was here, listening, waiting, wanting this. The air felt thick like breathing through silk, and every part of me buzzed with the impossible contrast of fear and fire. I stopped in front of the bedroom door. My hand hovered near the handle but didn't touch it yet. Instead, I turned to face the man behind me. He stood there, eyes on me, still silent, still waiting. His face unreadable, but his body told the truth. Tension in his shoulders, pulse ticking at the base of his throat, breath tight but steady. I stepped toward him, closed the space again, slower this time. Lifted one hand and let my fingers rest just under his collarbone. "Be ready," I said softly. He didn't flinch, just watched me, listened. "Be quiet." I let the word breathe in the space between us. "Be mine just for tonight." He nodded once. Just once. But that was all I needed. I turned the handle. Slowly, the door creaked open, just an inch then another. Inside, the lights were low. A different kind of candlelight. Warmer. Deeper. He couldn't see in. Not yet. And I didn't let him. Not right away. I held him at the threshold. Let him feel it. The waiting. The ache of not knowing. The way anticipation could stretch seconds into lifetimes. I leaned in close, so my mouth was near his ear, and whispered, "If you come and you don't speak, you don't lead, you witness, you receive, you feel, and you give me everything I ask for. Nothing more, nothing less." He swallowed hard. I felt it, felt his chest rise with something heavy. And then, I walked in first. Slow, unhurried. I let the robe fall from my shoulders, but didn't look back. Because I didn't need to. Behind me, I heard him exhale. Low. Controlled. And then his footsteps. Following. And behind both of us. My partner's breath in the room, like a promise held in the dark. The boundaries? Still there. Unspoken, but clear. But in that moment, it wasn't about rules. It wasn't about permission or even rebellion. It was about surrender. And ownership. And the strange, electric thrill of being fully seen. By two sets of eyes. Two kinds of desire. And none of it scared me anymore. Not because it wasn't real, but because it was. And I was ready. For all of it. He followed me in. The room was quiet. Still. Except for the low hum of music playing somewhere unseen, like it had been part of the room before we even entered it. And there sitting in the armchair across from the bed, half shadowed by candlelight, was my partner. He didn't speak. Didn't blink. He just looked at me. Not like a man watching his partner slip away, but like a man watching her return to herself. And God, there was something about that gaze. Steady. Proud. Open. I stepped forward, not breaking eye contact with him. I let my knees press into the edge of the bed. And slowly, without flourish, I climbed up, letting my body settle into the center like it had always belonged there. The sheets were cool against my skin, but everything inside me was burning. Behind me, I heard movement. The soft rustle of clothing. Not rushed. Not frantic. He was undressing. Not to perform. Not to impress, but with intention. Like he was shedding something heavier than fabric. And then I felt him. Not all at once. Not overwhelming. Just his hand. It found my wrist first. His palm warm against the delicate underside. He didn't grip. He didn't pull. He asked, not with words, but with the stillness of his touch. And I answered the only way I could. I exhaled. Long, slow, letting him feel the answer through the looseness in my body, through the slight shift of my weight as I leaned into the moment instead of away from it. He moved closer, careful, like I was something sacred, His other hand grazed my shoulder, and I swear, I almost wept. Because it had been so long since someone touched me like I mattered. Not just wanted. Mattered. His mouth didn't find mine right away. No. He took his time. He let his fingers explore. The curve of my arm. The hollow beneath my throat. The dip of my waist. All of it slow. Measured. Like he was memorizing me. I tilted my head back, eyes fluttering closed for just a second. And when I opened them again, I looked right at my partner. He was still there. Still watching. But it didn't feel voyeuristic. It didn't feel strange. It felt grounding. Because in his face, I didn't see jealousy. Or fear. Or regret. I saw devotion. Like this was never about another man. It was about me. About giving me something I didn't even know how to ask for out loud. My breath hitched when the man's lips finally brushed the skin just below my ear. A whisper of a kiss. Barely there. But the heat that surged through me? Immediate. Undeniable. He wasn't trying to seduce me. He was welcoming me. Welcoming me back into my own body. He trailed down slowly over collarbones, over curves, over forgotten places I'd stopped paying attention to long ago. And I just let go. I stopped performing. Stopped holding in my stomach. Stopped worrying about what I looked like in that angle of light. I stopped shrinking. And I let them both see me. All of me. Not the wife. Not the partner. Not the caretaker. Just me. Raw. Naked. Wanting. Alive. The man's hands were everywhere and nowhere all at once. Mapping me. Listening. Not just to the gasps, but to the silences between them. And through it all, I kept my eyes on my partner. Because this was his gift to me. His wild idea born from late-night confessions and quiet grief. And now it was real. I felt the tears before I realized they were falling. Not from sadness, but from the shocking, unshakable truth. That I could still feel this much. That I wasn't numb. I wasn't gone. I was here. And I was being held by hands that knew. Watched by eyes that loved. And kissed by a man who wasn't trying to claim me, but to offer me back to myself. And I took it. Every second. Every breath. Every ache of sweetness. Because sometimes, the most intimate thing you can give someone is not your body. It's your permission to want. And tonight, I gave that. And I took that. Without shame. Without apology. Without pretending I didn't need it. Because I did. So deeply, it shook me. And that was just the beginning. Everything blurred. Not in the way things blur when you've had too much to drink or when your thoughts scatter. But in that tender, suspended way time does when it doesn't quite know if it should speed up or slow down. I was somewhere in between. My breath caught again and again. And every time it did, it felt like my chest had to choose between holding the moment or surviving it. He was still touching me. Not hungrily. Not forcefully. But like someone unwrapping something he didn't think he'd ever be allowed to hold. His fingers pressed into the base of my spine, slowly trailing up, making me arch without meaning to. And it wasn't even what he was doing. It was how. Every movement said, I see you. I choose you. Right now, all of you belongs here. And just when I thought I was starting to settle into it, that gentle, consuming rhythm, I felt another presence move. My partner. I hadn't even heard him rise, but I felt him. His steps were soft across the floor, barefoot like always. But suddenly he felt larger. Like a force. Not just a man. He came closer. To the edge of the bed. And then without a word, he reached down and brushed a strand of hair from my cheek. That's when I trembled. Because that one touch was everything. It said, I'm here. I'm watching. I'm not leaving. And in that second, I felt myself crack open. Not from shame. Not from fear. But from the unbelievable tenderness of it all. I was being held. Not just by hands. But by intention. By presence. By both of them. One in front of me. one beside me, and somehow both inside the same moment. The same heartbeat. There was no script anymore. No boundaries we had to recite. No rules to follow. Only permission. And God, I didn't even realize how long I'd gone without that. Without being touched like I wouldn't break. Without being watched like I was something someone longed for. Without being chosen, again and again. His hands moved along my hips, anchoring me. The other's thumb swept just under my eye, catching a tear before it had the chance to fall too far. And that's when it happened. I let go. Not of my clothes. Not of control. But of the weight I didn't know I'd been carrying. I reached my edge. Emotionally. Sensually. Spiritually. And it wasn't a sharp drop. It was a soft collapse. A surrender. I remember gasping. Not from pleasure, but from recognition. Because in that moment, I finally recognized myself. Not the version that made lists, or folded towels, or smiled politely in rooms where she didn't belong, but the woman who felt deeply, unapologetically. The one who could receive without asking. Who could want without guilt? Who could ache and be cradled in that ache? And they held me. One behind, one in front. Arms wrapped, not to contain, but to witness. I cried, quietly, almost ashamed, until I realized there was nothing to be ashamed of, because I wasn't crying from sadness. I was crying from the overwhelming, impossible relief of finally being enough. And then, they kissed me, not at the same time, not in competition, but in rhythm. One on my shoulder, the other on my collarbone. It felt like the world had been reset, and I didn't know how we got here, or where we were going next. But I knew, that moment, those breaths, those hands, they were mine, ours, unrepeatable and completely real. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't want to be anywhere else. We lay there, the three of us, though only two remained. Soft music hummed quietly in the background, filling the spaces between our breaths. No one spoke. There was no need. The silence wasn't empty. It was full. Full of everything that had passed through us tonight. I felt his hand find mine under the blanket. His fingers curled around mine steady, sure. After what felt like forever, he whispered, "Thank you, more than you know." I turned to him. Looked into his eyes, the ones I thought I'd stopped seeing in the chaos of our years together. And I whispered back, "You didn't lose me tonight. You found me again." In that moment, I understood something fundamental. This wasn't about betrayal or loss. It was about rediscovery. Of ourselves. Of each other. Of what love could be when we dared to open the doors we'd long kept closed. The third man kissed my hand softly. A gentle promise. A quiet goodbye. Without another word, he slipped out the door. The room grew still. But I wasn't alone anymore. Not in my body. Not in my heart. Not in this relationship. Something had shifted, subtle, but undeniable. And I knew, from the core of me, that this night wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Sometimes love looks like possession. Like holding tight, gripping so fiercely you forget the air around you. But sometimes love looks like permission. Permission to be messy. To be curious. To be scared and still say yes anyway. Have you ever been loved enough to be set free? To be seen in all your contradictions, your wants, your fears? Would you say yes to something that scares you? That pulls you out of the safety you thought you had? If this story stirred something inside you, a secret longing, a quiet ache, or even just a flicker of curiosity, you're not alone. Here at Sheila Hart Tales, we peel back the layers of love, desire, and the things we don't always say out loud. So, if you want to hear more stories that unravel slowly, stories that feel like whispers in a quiet room, meant just for you, subscribe now. And tell me, what would you have done? I'm listening.